good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, listeners, and anybody that might be tuning in for the first time. What we're doing at the moment now is we're having a Saturday with Stephen session. So he's been so popular that we're dragging him back now every Saturday morning. So we're just touching up on certain things that have happened, whether or not the thought process is the same. And as everybody is seeing from the TV, newspapers, etc., things are moving very, very, very quickly. Sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But that's something that's happening and we're all getting used to it now. So, Stephen, good morning again, my friend.
Hello there, Chris. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. You?
Very well, thanks. Very well.
Good man, Good man. So, Steve, Saturday session with Stephen.
Saturday with Stephen, I quite like that. I thought we were on...
Yeah, it's got a little ring to it. And who knows,
maybe we'll be... Michael Aspel session last week, but...
maybe we'll be giving out T-shirts soon. Who knows? Now, a week. They always say that a week in politics is a long time, and my goodness me, a week in our industry now is so fast. The changes, the news, different ideas, different principles, different focus, changing so much. So, anything that sticks out for you during this last week?
Well, I mean, I think another busy week in terms of what we've seen, more on a macro level in terms of the government response to changing trends, whether it be in admissions due to coronavirus, or in terms of vaccine capabilities and development of solutions down the line. Sort of with a large word of caution on President Trump's current thoughts around disinfectants and the like. But look, I mean, there's been a lot of good stuff. I think a lot more intelligence. And I guess as we go through this crisis, Chris, like everything, we get more data. That data influences the advice that is given not only to government but actually more broadly, and then is released into industry and the public. So I think a couple of standouts for me is really the we had some light at the end of the tunnel. Let's say light at the start of the tunnel. Nobody knows how long the tunnel is. That's part of the challenge. But with a little bit of glimmer of hope, we'd expect you to see some of the more more confident or the more bullish carriers historically. Take the example of Emirates. Who some of us were hanging our hats onto in terms of starting operations next month in May, and then a massive blow, to most of that capacity now not coming back into Q3. So they've pushed most of that back now into July and the month beyond for a restart. So that was disappointing to see, because I guess that the old analogy sort of either lead, follow, or get out of the way. If you're not a leader in this space, whether it's leading in sort of the epidemiology and the medical response to the pandemic, or it's leading in industry around how we enter the new normal and process customers through airports or cargo through terminals or screening requirements, or it's having some conviction around restarting your business. So that of course all creates confidence. So I think massive blow to the industry. A lot of others were looking on to Emirates as sort of a bit of a test in terms of what would happen when they redeployed that capacity. So then pushing it back has been disappointing. I think the second standout thing for me, Chris, is that is a lot of question now about the liquidity requirements, and some of the carriers that have been more confident in their responses are the ones that are for want of a better term, more cashed up than others. And you've seen even some of the large carriers now that have sought support from shareholders that's been turned down. That they've sought support from the markets. It's been largely viewed with caution or trepidation, and indeed government support has also been cautiously offered. I guess that puts into question sort of the viability, and so the carriers that have been in receipt of government support or support from states, whether it be commercial loan basis or otherwise, are the ones that certainly got capability to recover recover well with a sustainable proposition, and probably at a, outside of COVID-19, are a sensible business that has historically delivered, and those that are not seeing that kind of support from their governments or shareholders are the ones that would have to question the long-term viability. So the question about liquidity comes up for me, or that sort of wraparound, because we haven't looked to liquidity within the airline industry has always been a challenge. Creating cash piles has not been easily achieved for the many, but actually for the few that can, there's question about the shareholders, returning that cash to shareholders, etc. So all those kind of dynamics are investing in capital for growth. So I think the ones that you've seen that have come out strong, so the likes of Wizz Air, for example, strong liquidity and weather the storm. There was some good commentary around them this week. So I think those are the sort of two standard things to me. One is this piece around sort of what the new normal will engender in terms of is it about a return to profitability through sustainable kind of management, or is it about actually building a strong cash pile to be able to access that in times of crisis? And so that those are kind of the important things for me this week.
Yeah, and some of the signs, like also, even though it wasn't just last week but a week before, the amount of aircraft that's being retired as well by Lufthansa, and the way they're approaching their business. And being an ex-Lufthansa, I've always found them to be, very cautious, very conservative. So when they're making decisions like that and bringing things forward, that gives a bit of an indicator as to what the next year to 3 years, etc., is going to be like. So that's that's quite something. Now,
so just to add there, the amount of it, whilst a lot of the retirement plans were sort of sitting in the sidelines and they've been well communicated around the restructure of network or based on future deliveries, I think what this has done is probably, as we were saying last week, I think Chris is, was Winston Churchill said to never let a good crisis go to waste. Always use it as an opportunity. I think what this has probably done is accelerate a lot of that was already in the pipeline. So a lot of the plans were already in place around it. The question then is around the impact then to the OEMs, because this creates massive down the line impacts for the likes of Boeing and Airbus in particular, and all of that associated supply chain. And so with lots of aircraft, every man and his dog will be deferring aircraft deliveries. And so the impact of you can get rid of some of those gas guzzlers out of your fleet as Lufthansa and others are doing. But the downstream effect of that across our industry as a whole, and the aerospace piece is going to be massive.
No, it is. It's huge. It's already. I'm just thinking of some of the statistics. Like was it ICAO was saying that there'll be potentially 1.2 billion fewer international air travellers by September 2020, and business as usual by September 2020. The passenger totals could drop by as many as, who knows, so these sort of estimates that keep being reviewed upwards, it's a big old shocker. And then then when you look at the passenger numbers and cargo and aircraft movement numbers in some of the big airports, like Frankfurt, 86% down on movements, passengers 97% down. The impact is immense, isn't it? It's just, and then all the surrounding businesses that associate and rely so much on being right round the airport or on the way to the airport, and it's really, really affecting so many people.
This was the other piece around. The liquidity. I was sort of, in the previous comment, the cash needs of airlines, brought into question, and I think that will change probably moving forward. But actually, you look at all of the suppliers. You look at, the ground handling business, for example. Not particularly profitable at the best of times, as you and I know well, and many of our listeners and viewers will do too. But this has massive impacts on the associated supply chain. And there needs to be, therefore, something we touched on last week as well, more of a strategic, collaborative approach between customer, airline, and supplier, handler or otherwise, because the likelihood is that when a restart opportunity comes along, some of those businesses that have been historically your handlers in the past may no longer exist.
Yeah, no, definitely, and there's going to be a different dynamic, I think, as well between all of the parties in the supply chain. Now, with those partners, one of the things I wanted to ask you, airports, Steve. Okay, now airports have been a platform for other people to conduct their business, but I think now with the various, not only security, but now safety, hygiene, duty of care, the facilitation of those businesses at each airport, my feeling is that airports are going to take a much more influential and controlled approach to how the business is going to be now in the future. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think this is what I suspect that a lot of airlines, are discussing now, and I know from discussions I've had in this week that this question is top of mind. Is it's a bit like the response to the Richard Reed shoe bomber, or the response after 9/11 to security, or the lags, the liquid aerosols gels impact that came in. It was a piecemeal approach that came in bit by bit, airport by airport, regulator by regulator, country by country, and there was no one unified body that took the bull by the horns and said, right, we have the authority and we have the confidence of industry to harness all of these requirements across the board, to kind of aggregate the needs by market, where it might be specific or localized, and come up with a sensible response to the challenges, or to the new policies or compliance requirements, and proceed with a kind of a collective, harmonious response across the board. And I think that's the question that we're being asked this week: what will the response in Manchester Airport be to social distancing? What will the response in Changi in Singapore be to pre-screen of customers to enter the terminal? How will airports with closed gate lounges like KLIA or Changi in Asia respond to the need for social distancing at the gates? What's the impact of this on screening staff? What happens with somebody that alarms an AMD or needs a pat down after a full body scanner has provided an activation? What about an intervention that's required on the cabin baggage screening point? Yeah. And you've got to interact with a customer. Pat down. Have we equipped the staff with the PPE? Will we equip staff with PPE? What is the risk profile? I think those are the questions that are being asked, Chris. That I think that somebody needs to kind of collectively. I say somebody rather than somebody, somebody or industry group, or I guess it can't be one regulator alone. I mean, we've got different regulators in different spheres. So EU ops, even across the EU, we've got 28 countries, but largely commonality across the security policy. What might be different is the process, but security policy is largely consistent. But what we're seeing now is even the epidemiology that is influencing government responses. We've got 50 plus states in the US. You get a different response across all the states, let alone the country. So this is going to play out in a piecemeal way, I suspect. It's not going to be particularly well joined up for a long time. And I think that some of this. I remember the famous Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense in the US, said, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, there are unknown knowns, but there are many unknown unknowns. And I think the unknown unknowns is people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and that's dangerous.
Industry doesn't know, where this will take us. So one thing is the restart. I mean, that will be led by I guess largely by science and countries reopening borders and countries reopening business and commerce. That will dictate probably a the demand profile. So there's demand ratchets up, capacity will likely. Yeah, I mean that seems fairly straightforward. Difficult and challenging, all be the same, but straightforward. What we don't know, what we don't have a handle on, are all of those policy questions, and then the application of process to meet the policy or comply with the policy. And I suspect that there's many differing views, and many smarter people than myself will have a much more a cohesive view on how this applies. But I do think this is something that will probably need to be accelerated if it's going to play out in any robust way that is meaningful for industry, and not going to create further damage at a time that the markets need to recover as quickly as possible to start to piece the whole thing back together again.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier when you said the difference between anybody and anybody, and those bodies, as we've known for a long time, whilst and no disrespect, they do a great job and they bring everybody together. Sometimes it's because they represent such a broad membership that it almost handicaps them or holds them back from making direct decisions and giving directives that make sense.
Of course.
And I think, again, the same sort of issue is going to happen here. You know, there's going to be some that are going to say, do this. There's going to some that they're going to say, you must do this. And others going to say, you know, I shall make you do this, depending which culture and country they're in. But there needs to be some basic guidelines that are given all at once, so everybody can start doing the same thing at the same time everywhere. And then there's not so much disjointed approach to what we're doing.
Yeah, at the same time everywhere. I mean, that sounds almost Nirvana-esque, Chris. You know.
That's the way I'm looking at it, my friend.
Yeah, I'm not sure when or if we will reach that point. But I guess what we've got to do is, if we get, you could apply the 80-20 rule, I guess. If we look at the largest markets and largest carriers, and they were able to build consensus across the key and critical markets. I mean, you've got a single market, the European Union on a doorstep. You've got the United States of America, North America, and then you've got the rest of the kind of the big global markets. I mean, Asia Pacific, the highest growing air travel market in the world, historically. But even after 9/11, we saw that come back much quicker. In SARS 2008, we saw GFC 2008. Sorry, we saw Asia Pacific, growth reduce, but certainly come back much quicker than the rest of the world. But even in those markets, if you look at Asia Pacific, I mean, I don't know how many countries that consists of, but it's certainly a large proposition. And to try to get governments at the best. I mean, government is generally quite slow in good times. In peacetime, governments are generally slow. And wartime, we've seen some good and bad in government response to this pandemic. We've seen good and bad industry response. We've seen good and bad individual airline and airport responses. So you've got a cross-section across the board. But how does one kind of corral those large markets where, I take Asia Pacific, ASEAN. So ASEAN group of about 12 countries within Asia Pacific. Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Laos, Cambodia, etc. Philippines. That they were supposed to have open skies, a long time ago, but into sort of political aspects or selfish political requirements got in the way, and they never managed to kind of get there and divest the sort of the air transport or the air traffic rights, as a whole, as ASEAN region. The standards in that region were different yesterday, Chris, already in terms of policy and application of standards and process. But that market in ASEAN largely operates as a domestic market. Exactly. We might see it here, well, that's international. Singapore to Indonesia's international travel. Well, it's not really there. They see that as a domestic market, really, in essence. And so to a large extent, these countries have differing regulation base today, and I can't see that given all the history and the water under the bridge that's gone past there historically, how does an airline like the AirAsia Group or Singapore Airlines or Malaysia Airlines or Thai Airways, that's their base. I mean, that's their market. When you've got a dozen countries that are operating in different ways and opening up at different times and expecting to do different things. I mean, the complexity that throws an already complicated business that we've got today and the demands that we've got in our business have always been historically complex. Although less complex than some would have you believe, or maybe people make it complex for their own self-serving purposes. But
that's a point. We'll come to that. We'll come to that later as well.
You understand what I mean, Chris? I mean, I think that's going to be a real challenge. Say, look, I rely on this. This is my base. They're all operating in a different way. Let alone an airline, a global airline like British Airways that operates to X number of countries, or Emirates that operates to 120 countries. I mean, this is massive in terms of shifting policy. So I come back to your sort of your desire to have find the nirvana. I don't think we'll see that for quite some time, and I think that's going to be the biggest body of work that's required in our industry to ease us back into the new normal, or ease us into the new normal.
Yeah. Okay. Nirvana-esque, as you so astutely put it. But what I'm talking about, even if it's region by region, what I'm trying to say is, and I agree with you, I used to travel probably more than, I don't know, God knows how many people I've been traveling for the last 30 years extensively. But the thing that always used to frustrate me was, even in the same country, let alone the same region, you'd go through security and it'd be so different in one than another.
Yeah.
In one, you take your laptop out. In another, you leave it in. One, you have to take your shoes off. Another, you can leave them on.
Yeah.
All these differences are frustrating, and it also makes people ask why.
Yeah.
And as soon as people ask why, then they start questioning, getting frustrated, etc. So what I'm suggesting is that certain airports now, need to take more of a guiding responsibility, so that anybody that's in their airport community have to do certain things that they subscribe to. Now, whether that's a regional directive from a body, or whether it's point to point, whether it's agreements as countries and destinations open up, I'm sure there'll be some criteria that, unless you fall into it, there won't be any transport. So another thing that could come in the short term, until there is a vaccine or a cure, maybe people won't feel so relaxed about opening up and traveling through a hub or whatever. So, maybe there'll be more point-to-point traffic to start with. So, but the airports themselves now, they have to be the gatekeeper, surely, of the new duty of care for the passengers, the staff, and everybody else.
Oh, I think it's time. Chris, the airports, dependent on which airport you sort of reference or use as a proxy. I mean, airports have, customers generally don't go to the airport to hang out unless they're a spotter, or they've got some other obsession with sitting in Boots the Chemist or Costa Coffee in Terminal 2, which you perfectly can do down Kensington High Street if you like. But unless you are brought to the airport through the purchase of a ticket or a seat on an airline, you are the airline passenger. And the airports in some places have seen you as their customer, and others the airline has seen you as my customer. I'm not sharing that data with you. And the airport says, well, no, you're our passenger. We'll use as much of you as we want through this process. So, this has always been historically the challenge between airlines and airports in terms of sharing passenger data, or sharing profiles, or sharing kind of behaviors and sort of behavior analysis of customers. However, you're absolutely right. Airports will have to step up and raise their game, because they are, in this case, they are acting as the landlord.
Yep.
They are acting therefore as the custodian of good practice and safe practices and secure practices within their tenanted area or their leasehold. Yeah. So whilst you're under their roof, you might have been attracted or brought to that airport by the purchase of your ticket on Ryanair, which is taking you to the airport. But you are now sort of going to have to be shepherded through this process of the new normal, or through this new normal, whatever that might be, whether it's screening pre-entry to the terminal. Do we do that outside? Do we do that inside? Well, who's best to dictate? What kind of now is the, historically airports have said, well, we'll build airport terminals to 1.5 square meters queuing space per customer. Is that now 2.5? Is it 3.5? Is it 5? What does that look like? Is it lineal meters? Is it square meters? How do we build this space out? We've reduced the size of our terminals. The landside space is much less now because airports have, and rightly so, leveraged that space or converted that space for retail opportunities, because the passenger profiles have changed to do an awful lot more of that processing off airport. The security lanes configuration has got smarter and better as technology has improved, and the process of customers or the throughput of customers has improved through the central search areas, and the screening technology has improved, allowing them to release a lot of that landside footprint, and convert it into airside footprint and retail space.
Yeah.
But now, where do we configure it? Where do we do testing? Do we do temperature checking? Do we have self-certification? At what point have you got to engage with a human? Well, historically, actually, a lot of customers didn't engage with humans until they got to the boarding gate. And even then, it might not have been until the aircraft if they use a self-boarding gate, because I travel hand baggage only. I don't speak to anybody. I might have a little chat. Who was to say that Stephen wouldn't stop to have a little conversation with the security officer or somebody I bumped into in the shop? Of course, I would do. But generally speaking, you could go through that process without engaging with anybody.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to engage with either more technology, or more humans. Well, actually, the science has been telling us that engaging with humans right now is a bad idea. So, is it the airport? Back to your point, is it the airport that's going to tackle the response and giving us the answer to those questions? Is it the regulator that's going to guide that, or is it a cooperative of airports? Who might have some like-minded individuals and some similar thinking, or
That's it.
Some sort of new thinking. I was trying to avoid saying blue sky thinking because I hate consultant language like that. But thinking, but more than that, Chris, it's kind of the new normal. So we don't know what the new normal is. We don't know what it looks like, but we can have some good ideas. But what we will have to do, as well as setting out what the new normal may look like, is how do we actually get there? What's the journey that we go? Because the new normal will be iterative, I suspect. There might be several different iterations of the new normal.
Yeah.
So maybe the cooperative approach of a number of airports who are in a similar base. You could group some of the tier 1 airports. Let's take Heathrow, Frankfurt, Dallas Fort Worth, Atlanta Hartsfield. You could take a few of those large tier 1 global hub airports, Dubai, etc., and have some level of a common understanding, a common approach that is not dependent on a regulatory outcome.
Yeah.
Because the regulatory outcomes, the regulators probably more engaging with industry in the last few years, in my experience, in my time in industry. But for the large part, the regulator will do what they need to do to comply. I mean, shut a border, done, border shut, no engagement, no discussion, no consultation with the public, no consultation with industry. But maybe the airports can do that in a different way. And if they bring the stakeholder groups on board early enough, including the passengers, I hasten to add, because building that confidence is going to be really important. Sorry, very long answer to your very short question, Chris. Wouldn't be like me to say 10 words when I could say 100.
Well, no, that's exactly right. And being a consultant, I can understand that, my friend. So you've done well there.
I
can expect a big bill. No, but seriously, just to wrap up, because we want to keep these Saturday morning sessions with Stephen as short as possible. I agree. I think there definitely needs to be a lot more collaboration. That's an excellent way of also preparing certain steps before it comes to the trade bodies or the representative bodies or the regulators, because then maybe, like you said, when they just pull the barrier down, and has been the case in most of the examples, something was overlooked, something was forgotten, or then there had to be another change and an adjustment, and all of those things cause they cause confusion. It causes a little bit of, I wouldn't say fear, but a little bit of anxiety. And then there's mistakes that are made, and then people don't know, and there's a change again. So I think it's a definite need.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's one area that now we've covered. So that's very good. Now another one, which we won't get the time to cover this week, but it's the ramp up for people coming back to work. Okay. So next week we'll cover that, and we'll also have a little topic discussion on the future of private aviation. So will people start leaning towards private aviation, obviously in certain sectors? And if they do, what will that do then to the normal class options and products of the carriers?
Yeah, private aviation. I mean, I know you had a recent podcast with a chap from Lux Aviation, and that was an interesting podcast, Chris, and I enjoyed his comments. Not because I'd be top of his potential customer list, although I'd like to be, but that's unlikely. More so now than ever. But you know, for I guess a certain group of individuals, high net worth or the tier below, you know, there may be an argument to suggest that that the risk to them being out of action, either from illness or you know, heaven forbid worse, is too grave a risk. And it'd be interesting to you know, give some thought to that in the week prior to us discussing more. Yeah.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much again. So
thank you, Chris.
These little Saturday sessions.
The shirts are getting better each Saturday as we go through this. So yeah, I'm waiting with bated breath, as I'm sure our viewers are, for next week's rendition.
Oh, don't worry about that, my friend. I've got plenty of these. All right, listen. Take care of yourself.
I've seen a few in our time.
Yeah. Take care of yourself.
Thanks a lot.
Be safe, and we'll speak next week.
Thanks. Have a good week. Thanks, Chris.
Now, bye.